everyone, and welcome to episode number 4 of the Band Director Blueprint Podcast. I'm Eric Villalobos. With me is co-host Taylor Smith. We appreciate you for joining us today, as we have quite an episode for you. For our listeners that are new to the community, the Band Director Blueprint Podcast is a place for current and future music educators to contribute their thoughts on building and developing music programs, new teaching techniques, and just good teaching altogether. Today's guest is Dr. John Burdett, Director of Instrumental Studies and Director of Bands at Azusa Pacific University. We had a deep dive about how passion and suffering can be incorporated in music, how teaching philosophies can change over the years, and how beauty is a tangible form of love. I'm so excited to have Dr. John Burdett on the show. I studied under him at Azusa Pacific University. I like to think of him as a mentor and also a big brother of mine. Without further ado, Dr. John Burdett. Well, what is your elevator pitch to let others know who you are and what you do?
Oh man, how deep we want to go into this, Eric? The simple answer.
Yeah, take it as much as you want.
Who I am and what do I do? Well, I guess the easy answer is I teach at Azusa Pacific, and I conduct the wind ensemble. I teach grad students in the grad conducting areas, and then the grad music education areas, and then the undergraduate, some of the coursework there, and then help lead the instrumental area. So in regards to strategic vision, recruiting, admissions, and all that type of activity as well. So I guess on paper, that's what I do. I mean, outside of APU, I hope to be, and I'd like to think I am involved in music education in our area, especially in the band world in our area, and doing what I can to help elevate the quantity of music making going on and the quality of music making going on. So I think that's a large part of what I do. I also serve on the board of a number of nonprofits. I find myself traveling to Texas and other places doing fun stuff with music and meeting teachers there. I like to coach my kids' soccer teams, although they're getting old now and they're better than my coaching is. So that's coming to a close. My oldest is going into high school, so that's crazy for me. I don't know, who else am I? Eric, you know me. Am I missing something here?
No, I mean I think that's pretty much overall snapshot of.
I've got my Arcadia Music and Arts Symposium shirt on. That's another thing that I'm involved with, and summer activities there. So
it's a shame
Can you go ahead and explain what Arcadia Summer Symposium is and how you're involved?
Yeah, so myself and a few others a number of years ago kind of had a vision for a summer gathering. There's not really a whole lot of that going on in Southern California. I mean, there's some sort of music camps up in the mountains, Idlewild and others, which have significant reputations, but there's not a whole lot going on here like in the Basin. So I had a vision for a thing. Tony Nunez, who's heavily involved in the percussion world, had a vision for some type of summer music activity that also focused on middle school and high school students, and then also wanted to provide a place for high school music teachers and middle school music teachers to gather and to engage with ideas that were challenging, yet edifying and growing. But so there's a lot there. We could probably go an entire hour, but that's where.
So you're saying that students are actually allowed to be a part of this symposium, and
yeah,
not just for educators,
right? So there's multiple tracks to the entire symposium. There's a middle school track. There's a high school student track. Even within the high school track, there's a percussion area, winds and brass area, and then the educator track as well for full-time educators. Sort of head director concept, and then there's also a track for sort of the instructor, brass tech, visual tech, percussion folks. So
I guess it's the West Coast version of the Music for All Summer Symposium.
In some ways it is. But it's also in California, so it's a little different. It's got a different angle to it. So yeah, right. And also our goal is to be a lot less being talked at in a lecture-based interaction and more of a symposium style. So it's a little bit more about free-flowing ideas.
Eric,
So
didn't you go
it's
to that?
similar.
Eric, you went to that
Yeah,
a couple years ago.
technically I was on faculty technically, but
Yeah.
I did like the way that it was set up, where we can just be able to sit and just talk to each other, and it was just more of that community aspect. And I think that's why I really appreciated that more, opposed to like some of the other ones that are locally, or even like at a national level too. So where did your passion for teaching originate?
Mm. Well, my mom was a teacher, so I guess in some capacity you could say it started there. I am the oldest child in my family, so there's probably some sort of nature nurture thing going on there, some foundational psychological elements. Um, but I think somewhere like in sixth grade, so I started playing clarinet in fifth grade in my school band, and my middle school band director was a Dixieland jazz clarinetist. Um, Great
awesome
guy. I don't know if I was more scared or more motivated by him, but either way, I'm here today, so that says something. Um,
So you're playing clarinet fifth grade, and what
mhm.
inspired you specifically to pick the clarinet besides that
Right,
your teacher was playing clarinet?
right,
Did he
right.
come in? Did he come in the room, wailing when
Wailing
you
over
came
it.
on?
Yeah, that's right. No, no, or at least not that I recall. Um, I, well, to be honest, what I recall is that I had a couple of friends who were joining, and I wanted to be better than them. So that's what my fifth grade schema was at that point. And my family, both my parents are college educated, but we were a single income family at that point. We were on the lower socioeconomic spectrum. So we didn't have the money. I wanted to play saxophone first, but we didn't have the money to rent the saxophone. So I started on clarinet. 2 years later, my brother joined band, and apparently my parents found the finances for him to learn saxophone. So that's still something I hold a deep grudge about. But then I learned saxophone over a weekend because clarinet
It's
and
easy,
saxophone
right?
are
Yeah,
somewhat
yeah.
similar. Yeah, trombone player speaking.
I know, right?
So yeah, I somewhere in there I started playing. But that question to your question, Eric, I think somewhere in there we had a little marching band in our band of maybe 45. I don't remember, and we marched in the local parades. This is up in Anderson, California. Population probably 12,000 at that point because the lumber mills were in full swing at that point. So we had local parades there, and the larger town of Reading next to us. And so we had this little marching band, and I just remember thinking the drum major. I go, that's kind of a cool role. I think I'd like that. And so that interest, I think, sparked it. And then that director, and then he retired after my seventh grade year, and Mr. Dykstra came in, who was young and energetic, and he had a great vision for how things ought to go. And I think that inspired me as well, to just take on the role of leader. And at that point, it was probably much more narcissistic, maybe more now, I don't know. But I think that's where it started. And then the whole role of marching band and the built-in leadership orientation of that, I think, is kind of what piqued my interest at that point. So that's what I recall.
It's funny because I felt the same way when I saw people taking leadership, and when I was in high school, especially as a drum major. I thought the same kind of impression, is like, oh, that's a pretty neat leadership role. I kind of felt that was a narcissistic thing, and I feel like when I was younger in my life, thinking that, okay, you're the top, you have to lead from the front. But I realized more and more how important it is, how it is with service, how service is more important, how to be a servant in that leadership role. And it made me learn a lot of things. And like, actually, I learned that a lot more from you too, actually. And I'm very grateful for that, for sure. So
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate
yeah.
that. And by the way, since we're sort of maybe part of the audience who might listen to this, hopefully someone listens to this, would be some new teachers or college students. And the idea of music teacher identity construction, those are the terminology that's used in the narrative and in music education research.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty typical process that I am in the band. I see the teacher, and I somehow identify with that role in some small part, and then I start to think for myself, I think I'd like to become a music teacher. So that is a really common theme. There are other ways to to develop a music educator identity, but that's a fairly typical one that we see. And as you mentioned, you might have kind of gone through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I did notice there was a shift from when I first started to like where I was going, leaving, and we had a lot of heart to hearts, and I did like it didn't click until after the fact, and I hate
Hmm.
that because hindsight is just a son of a gun.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, I do appreciate how where when it comes to where you're just processing that kind of taking that information in and I noticed that more, especially like being in the military. I got
Hmm.
once I got promoted, and I found the importance more of how service is and how service is
Yeah,
when it comes to teaching
yeah.
in that matter. So but
Hmm.
also, uh, how has your teaching philosophy changed over the years? I know that you were a high school band director, you were a middle school band director, you taught at three different colleges. How, like in the course of time, how does that change over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it has changed, and it still is changing. It still is changing, and I think that's an exciting thing. And I think that as teachers, we need to be thinking philosophically. And I think the good teachers are. They may not say I'm thinking philosophically, but they are because they're constantly asking, "Why am I doing this?" They're constantly asking, "How do people learn? What's the purpose of my music program? What's the purpose of this class? What's the purpose of my teaching and interaction with every single student in front of me?" So philosophy is very important to me. So how has mine changed? Um, Boy, it's so hard too because our philosophies are just so innate to us. So it's hard to sort of step back and look at it. But I've thought about it quite a bit. So I would say initially, I was just my philosophy was to do what my previous teachers had done. And I couldn't necessarily articulate what that was or why that was or how that was, but I was just doing it. And I think initially uh, the philosophy was to make an intergalactic band, the intergalactic band of the universe, as my
Is
mentor,
this a
Abel
Space Force
Ramirez.
thing,
That's
or
right. As my mentor, Abel Ramirez, would used to say, the intergalactic marching band of the world. So that was sort of my initial thought, because that's what I thought the point was to an extent. However, I would say, and I think in large part due to my faith background, that I realized that there's more to life than necessarily being great at something. Um, so I think I had this music element, which is I want to be the best player I can be. I want to have the best band as possible. But somewhere hidden in there was also, I think that the purposes of life are beyond the music and trophies. So I think it took a while for those to sort of find themselves in some sort of congruency. So I think early on that was the case. I don't think I was any good at it. I wouldn't say the band was intergalactic by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I'm just thankful that my students are still alive. I was on Facebook. If Facebook is good for anything, it's to stay in touch with former students. So I've been very thankful that they are still alive, and some of them went on to be music teachers, which is an act of God in and of itself that they would do that after uh, my poor teaching there early on. But um, so how has it changed? I think that I've been able to articulate with more specificity why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I do think that a lot more reading and a lot of my doctoral work helped to put terms to phenomenon that have to do with the development of the interior of the person or the development of the souls of my students, uh, the development of my students, in maybe we might call it the secular world, or we might just say development of us as human beings. And so, that's fine. We can use different terminology for the phenomenon. But so I think my philosophy changed as I was able to put terms to that. But I would also say, and Taylor, you kind of mentioned this before we went on air, is my dissertation was on kids with hearing loss in instrumental music. And that was not what I went into my doctoral studies doing. That was not my intent. My intent was to study music teacher identity construction, the student teaching process, beginning with teachers, and gesture and psychology of gesture and all that. And then my second son was born deaf, and that um, that was all actually coming to fruition about the same time. And so the reality of my own personal life with his life, and then realizing that I might be able to benefit some people by focusing on this. And so I did. I started to focus on that, and so I remember teaching. So my son was, I think, 3 or 4 at that time, and in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, was this hospital that had a school for kids with hearing loss. And so I started teaching these little kids, elementary school and younger, and they're there to develop a language. They're to learn how to talk and listen with devices, right? My son got cochlear implants. There are other kids with hearing aids and various other listening devices. And so I'm in there teaching these little kids music. And that was a great stretch for me, because I was used to a baton and in front of 50 people who are generally highly motivated and want to make the best sounds possible. And now I'm with 3-year-olds through like 10-year-olds. And the purpose is not necessarily to make great music. It's not to sing in tune. It's to sing, to and to experience all the music making has to offer, in addition to developing language and developing speech. So I think that experience kind of helped pull me out of the tethers of performance-based band instruction, which, by the way, I have no problem with. Everything can get better, but that's still important. I think you do music and you do it to be better at it, and you do it to make things beautiful. That's actually it. You do it to make things beautiful. So even when I'm working with kids with hearing loss, we're still going to make this beautiful, but what they're capable of at this moment and what these people are capable of are different things. So I think my philosophy changed as I began to deal with the realities of my own life. And I think this is true for you too, right, Taylor and Eric? I bet as you walk into settings and you're teaching and you go, well, this is what, Eric could say this because he was one of my former students, well, this is what Dr. Burdett said I'm supposed to do. But now I'm here and I'm not sure that what he said is really best.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And by the way, I want that for all my students. I want them to question what I have to say.
Yeah.
And then really ask, is this what's best? Now, because I'm still growing, so what I said may not be. I do think it's generally better than most, but
would you say there was a defining? Would you say there was a defining moment where you realized that your philosophies were changing? Like, is it a 5-year mark? Was it a 10-year mark? Was it it just happened over time and I didn't even notice it?
Yeah,
because going into teaching, you have your specific, mindset of what you hear and what you want to create and share. But at any point, it happens for different times for different people. So was there a defining moment where you realized your philosophy was changing into experience based?
Yeah, well, and the research generally says that as teachers, we sort of fumble to about year 3. In year 3, we sort of figure it out. And then by about year 7, we don't really improve much. So 3 to 7, we sort of figure it out and then develop a system. And in year 7, we don't change a whole lot. So when I think back to my own life, I would say that sort of followed suit for me. So I do think those early years.
Similar. Yeah, I believe that 3 and 7 year mark. I haven't hit 7. I'm at 4. So I just hit the 3, and I definitely had a moment in like almost a midlife crisis at 3 years. And you kind of make the decision: are you going to jump forward? Are you going to keep going and staying true to what you believe, or is this something that you need to change? So
yeah, and I don't think we ever really. It's not. I think about like a train. We're on a track, and that track starts to move. It's not like we jump off the track and then sort of abandon. Now we're taking taxis or Uber, but we're still in the train. It just tends to want to move a certain direction. So, in that way, we're the sum of our past experiences.
I would also want to add in, like, okay, there are people out there, especially in college, that have a specific mindset of what they want to achieve, and it's unfortunately, a lot of it's ego. I want to be just as good as my band director was, or I want to be a BOA and win nationals and be wherever and have a 300-person marching band and top, and that kind of mindset can only get you. It's a great aspirational mindset. Like, it gets you to the next level. It gets you to move in a direction, but over time, you do end up becoming wiser. I don't know how do you explain a student's mindset getting into a career of music education with the mindset of just as being as successful as possible.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, they realize their thought of success was completely way off. I don't know.
Yeah. I can speak a lot about that. So feel free to redirect me. But I think to an extent in the college world, in America, your college degrees may not say conservatory on, but they are living in the conservatory mindset. And the conservatory mindset is a ultra performance based pursuit. And your applied teachers have it, your ensemble directors have it. And so you sort of swim in it. It's like you're the fish and you swim in it and you go, what water? You don't realize it's different. That's what it is. And I'm not saying it's entirely bad, but we just really recognize it's there. So Taylor, you and I, we come out of a conservatory mindset. We start teaching, and unless we had someone in there say, learning and teaching and growing doesn't necessarily always have to be about becoming the intergalactic champion of the world. It can be about other things as well. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people, I think, take this to the ultra extreme, and I don't think that's healthy. Music making needs to be as good as it can be, and that's the whole point. In fact, I would say if students don't feel like they are being successful, all of this desire for the interior self to grow actually doesn't happen. So no doubt there is this, I think, students who come out of college, and there usually is some sort of catharsis. There's a second naivete, as we might say. We realize our initial philosophy coming in isn't cutting it, and so we have to either leave the profession or we have to alter a little bit. And I think you mentioned sort of BOA and those high profile performance-oriented experiences. Listen, I'm all for those. I'm all for those. There's nothing wrong with that by itself. I think also, sort of sidestep here, I wonder if I had not been... So I started teaching in a generally lower socioeconomic area. And so if I was going to aim for BOA, I'm not sure that was the right aim. That's not the right end result.
Right.
So I think to some extent this has to do with what areas we're teaching. Now, I'm not selling my students short. What I am saying is that a realistic goal at this moment? Does it accomplish my objectives, my philosophy, and so forth? So I think this is where, as music teachers, if we are a profession, you've got to get into a context and think, what is in the best interest of my students that accomplishes the objectives of my school, my objectives, the objectives set forth in the music profession, and by the state and federal guidelines, et cetera, and then we're making decisions based on all of that context for right here, right now. And then what's in the best interest of my student right here, and for Marnay, for Juan, for all of these students, what's in their best interest right now. So I think that's exciting in that way. As music teachers, we're so entrepreneurial because we're taking all of these different priorities and throwing them into one place. The English teacher doesn't do that. I think that's exciting.
I love everything you just said, especially about music teachers being entrepreneurial. Like your band program or your music program is a small business, and you have to manage it that way. Yeah. So it's easy to have the big picture concept of everything, and you have a direction, but then getting nitty gritty and actually understanding what the students need at that time. They need a music teacher, or they need a mentor, or they need a hero. Right. What is it that they need in order for them to be successful? Because that's how your program will become successful.
Right.
And a lot of people don't get that until it's too late, or they quit and they give up on themselves.
Yeah. And to circle back, I would also say one of the ways my philosophy changed, one of the ways that I've changed, is when I went into teaching, I saw a band. Now, at least I hope I do, I see individuals. And I'm attempting to care for, and I'm attempting to feed, I'm attempting to create experiences and curriculum that is going to grow the individual. And in the process of that, a band happens. But whereas when I first started, I was not thinking individuals at all. I was trying to think broader to that, and I think to the detriment of my students.
So you brought up passion, and that's one of I feel like uh, that's one of your zingers. I think, especially at APU, and how at least going through there, how with the faith and everything that we dealt with and how important it was and but you also how like brought it towards suffering and how important it was for us to suffer for our craft. And that was something where like I just still can't wrap my head around, and I don't know if I'm processing it very well, but um maybe you can elaborate that a little bit more, cuz I feel like when it comes to suffering, like I don't want to suffer on my craft. I want it to be enjoyable. You
Mhm.
know, there are times where I do walk away from the horn and I just want to just step back, but there was other things that you brought uh explaining why it was important to do that. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, yeah. When we use the word suffering, it's just it's used in contexts that are so oppressive and negative. So it has such a bad contemporary usage. But the etymological root of suffering shares an etymology with the word passion. So that's why when Bach wrote, the Passion of Saint John, he's not talking about, or if in more contemporary terms, right? You watch Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, where it's not like, and we're talking about Jesus, the historical figure. It's not like Jesus was excited about dying. He wasn't passionate about dying. He suffered, and so we're using the term passion in lieu of the word suffering because they share meanings. I did not. My dear friend and colleague at APU, Director of Choral Activities, one of my favorite people in the world, Dr. John Sutton. He's the one who brought that to me. I was, I would say, I'm heavily influenced by the Dr. Dallas Willard, who was on the faculty at USC philosophy for his entire career. Um, and for those of you who are interested in faith and explaining the nature of our spirits and things like that, I think his as a contemporary writer is the best. So I was coming at life from the notion of what Dr. Willard had to say about the nature of the will. And so I was heavily thinking about the will. And when students are in my class, what's their will? They're willing to learn. And we use the words like motivation, like Taylor, like you said. So Dallas used the word will, and I think will actually encompasses a broader thing. So I actually tend to use that. But then Dr. Sutton said to me, "Yeah, it could be." He said because suffering is related to passion, and that's where my mind went. That's so I stole that from him. So Eric, I have to give direct props to who it comes from. But all this to say that when we're passionate about something, we know we're passionate because we're willing to suffer for it.
Right.
And people know this instinctively. My wife knows when I'm passionate because I'm willing to suffer. When she asks me to do something, I go, yes, of course, because I am willingly suffering. I'm willingly sort of abandoning my own pursuits, my own desires at the moment to do what she wants me to do. In the ensemble context, we're constantly suffering. We're constantly saying, I am choosing to, because I'm passionate about this, because I love this, because somewhere deep down I want to be a part of this. I am choosing to go back to letter A when Mr. Smith said we're going to do it again. Back to letter A again. Or we're going to go back to page 2 of our dot book. Page 2, we got to run this set again, right? And it's Saturday at 2 p.m. and we've been on the field for 6 hours. We're suffering in the best way possible. We're refining our wills. And so I think, am I hitting on
Yes,
what you're asking?
I love that
Absolutely.
interpretation. I can definitely see how that directly impacts even my students.
And don't we want this for all of our students?
Oh,
We want
absolutely.
them to have, and really actually the word that normal people use is persistence. That they're going to persist through challenges. And so I think we're talking about the same phenomenon, suffering and persistence.
Yeah, I mean, at Modern Day, they're nationally known for their athletics
Right.
program. Football team and everything. So perseverance is
Right.
is one of the core principles of those teams. And honestly, like when I look at the music program, I don't necessarily have thought of that word
Mhm.
for us. It's different, you know.
Mhm.
We have a different pursuit.
And I mean, I think about my own children. I have 4 kids of my own, and I think about my own path, and I think that the ability to stick with something, um, or as my old saxophone teacher used to say, Greg Riley used to say, "There's plenty of talented people who are going hungry." That was his way of saying, "You've got to practice. You've got to suffer through to get better at this. Talent only takes you so far. It's actually persistence. It's your ability to suffer, or as Eugene Peterson would say, a long obedience in the same direction. You've got to continue suffering towards your goals, and you'll get there, right? You'll get there. If you stick with the thing, you'll get there. When is a different question. When is a different question. But you'll get there. And that's what I want for my own kids. You know, I want for them to know what it's like to persist, to suffer consistently, and then to taste those goals. Or taste the fruition of those goals come to fruition. So I think that's actually the best that competitions have to offer us is that it's some sort of tangible thing that says you have suffered well and look what we did. We persisted and we accomplished.
Yeah, I did. I do remember as an early instructor telling my students the harder that we work. I didn't really use the word suffering for obvious reasons,
Right.
but it was more of
Well,
like,
Mr. Villalobos told us we're suffering today.
yeah, right,
It's not.
exactly. Yeah, but I did explain that if we keep on working harder, like just pushing ourselves just to that extra limit, kind of like we're at the gym. You hit that PR record, then you want to push that PR record even more for your
Right.
special benefit. And in our faith, the faith goes back into it. Is like if we work hard and we are diligent about our faith, the rewards are going to be even greater. And I kind of implemented that when I was teaching at an early age,
Hmm.
about how the rewards are going to be more beneficial for us if we kind of push ourselves even more. Yeah,
Hmm.
and then that makes a little bit more sense to me now of like how important it is. And yeah, that's great. That's great.
And so to piggyback, if all we're doing, however, is persisting, that really gets tiring. Right? Even God rested at one of those days of creation. And I think that's the tie-in when I'm working with an ensemble, we have to have a moment where we go, that was it.
Right.
That's music. That's why we do this. So that's very important that we persist, we suffer, we're diligent, we're working hard, tirelessly, ruthlessly, but it's to get that aha moment. And if we don't get the aha moment, we don't look back and say, all that hard work was worth it. And that's why one of the reasons why I think some students drop out of music is because they don't get those. Yes, we did it. We made music. Even little fifth graders,
Yep.
look at those whole notes. Or for me, playing Sweet Caroline in my band back in
Mm,
fifth grade. Like
Right.
this is cool. Or or I mentioned that I put this on Facebook the other day. I'm having some construction done in my house, and one of the crew members, he figured out I was a music teacher, and I mean he's 48. He's a construction worker. I mean blue collar. He's great. I love him. He goes, I played clarinet back in middle school, and I can still sing Jefferson County Overture. And I mean, I was not expecting this, but at all from this gentleman. But it had made such an impact on who he is, that it worked. It stuck with him, And I think that was, I think we could say that was one of those moments where some teacher got all that, and that guy had an aha moment. And what 30 years later, he still remembers it.
That's so influential. Like that's so meaningful. I had that a couple this my first year at Valley this year, but uh, I think what really bothered me is that I had a kid that didn't even give it a try. The excuse was it's just not for me, and like he was in band in middle school, but I think since there was a new band director and stuff, I was like, just give it a year, just give it a year,
Right.
and it's like, and due to what the circumstances we dealt with, we still had a good overall year, but I mean, especially for that one, that's what really got me. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, you could have seen the fruits of our labor, but
And isn't that the hard part about being a music teacher? It's you're trying to tell kids about this aha experience, but they don't know, they've never tasted it.
Right.
So it's like you trying to tell somebody that I've been to the promised land, so you got to believe you got to believe it with just me telling you. And how do you explain music?
Right. Right.
Gray, green, beautiful. We can't. We can sort of emote like and we do our best, but at the end of the day, it's just simply saying, you guys got to trust me, this is good. Or you take them to other musical experiences that other people are doing and have them sense that, right? That's why one of the reasons why I love and I work so hard to get high school and middle school bands to come to campus, because I want them to sit with these college players and go, oh, that's what this is supposed to sound like. And goosebumps. They got to get goosebumps. And that's what we got to do no matter what age we're teaching, whether you're teaching middle school, high school. You got to help your colleagues out. You got to look at who are the people in your district, or who are the people who are in your cohort of music teachers, and go to that next age group down and get them up to work with your kids. That's so essential too in helping the musician you're working with develop that musician identity as well. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
but
I know something.
In order for you to do that, you have to give up your ego, though. That's difficult for some people.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself
is,
aside. You mean
yeah.
you want me to like actually let someone else teach my kid? That's kind of all right.
That there are some people with too much ego, and then I think there are people with not enough ego. So there are some who are they're defensive. They don't want to bring their students to be with you because they may not feel good about that their product. I don't like to use that word.
Yeah,
but
they're embarrassed of what.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so practical right now, and it's such a real thing that a lot of teachers don't take a moment to just acknowledge that they may feel an insecurity on that, or they don't want their kids exposed to a guest conductor because that's going to make them look bad.
Right.
And I'm even guilty of that. I have an after school music program for elementary kids, and I've always wanted to have just tons of guests come in and a teacher on each instrument. And my goal and vision for that is to just continue to grow and provide education, music experiences for kids all over the county. But here I am, like, not letting other people come in clinic the band because I feel like I need to get it to a certain level in order for that to be practical for them. But I think those experiences are practical no matter what now. That's something I've changed in my philosophy.
Yeah. It's good. It's good.
So this is part of the show where we ask a random question, but it can still be music related, So how has failure or an apparent failure set you up for a later success? And do you have a favorite failure?
I feel like this is a job interview. A favorite failure. That's a good question. I think. I mean, I just failed all the time. I'm thinking back to those early teaching experiences, and it was just lots of failure. What I think it did is it made me realize what I don't know, and for whatever reason, I was very honest with myself that I don't know how to do this or this. I don't know anything about this, so I got to figure it out. So I would say, whether it was giving my band a transcription of Adagio for strings my second year, just stupidity like that, or maybe it was my first year. Hopefully I learned something by my first year. I didn't do that my second year, but just mistakes like that made me be honest that I know that I don't know and I need to find out, which is why finding mentors, whether they realize they're a mentor or not, finding mentors to ask those questions. Because you need people to be honest in your life. You got to have people who walk in and go, this is not very good. And who are going to look square in your eyes and say that. And so I think those early failures help push me to be open to some of my mentors who are honest, and not just honest, but have answers and can help me accomplish what I couldn't before.
What does service mean in music education?
Hmm. Well, I think first we have to think, who are we serving? That's the first question. And so we need to put that in our minds. That's got to be in the forefront. Who are we serving? And so first I would say we're serving our students. In a close second, we're serving their families. That's my priority. I do think some people might make an argument we're serving our schools and we're serving the state. I don't think that's true, although that's in there somewhere. We're serving our students first and their families second. I think then we're also serving the school population in which we're teaching. I think that's probably third. Then we're serving our profession uh, at large. So, what does it mean? I think it's doing the right thing. It's doing what is best.
Right.
It's doing the next right thing, as Dr. Willard would say. It's doing the next right thing. So, whatever is the next right thing for my student. Remember, I said I'm not looking at them as a band, but I'm looking at individuals. What's the right thing for them? And now, because humans tend to be somewhat alike, what is best for Taylor might be good for Eric as well. So, but I want to do what's best for them. So I'm serving them. I'm serving them. What else does it mean? I think it means letting go of your ego,
Yeah.
both on the overtly egotistical and then not having enough, not believing in yourself enough to go, I can make a difference here.
So there's a fine line to going. You don't want to go too far.
Yeah.
Or anything. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope it's more like a highway than a line. So there's a lot of space in there. But,
Right. Yeah. Right.
But, yeah, it is. It is. And I think as a Christian, this is where the scriptures and this is where the actual reality of the presence of an omnipotent God who can actually direct me in my own personal life right now. I think I have an advantage over people who may not, because I think that he is concerned with who I am, and so yes, I do think that it is a line somewhere. It's I'm not sure I like the word balance, but there is a good ego and there's a bad ego. Yeah, I think so. Freud helped us comprehend some of that. So
You had talked about college students coming into the profession, and their philosophy is one thing in their mind.
mhm.
And you said that generally we all tend to do what we've seen or we've experienced. And do you still feel that that's the best beginning route to entering this career?
um, I do. I actually do think that's the best route. As problematic as it is, what other routes are there? We're really talking about what I call neurological ruts. That when we see something happen, we tend to copy it. We see something happen, it creates a neurological rut by which I tend to then live my life. And that's this is the apprenticeship model. How to before the Industrial Revolution, how do we learn trades? I'd go and with the cobbler, I'd sit next to him or her, primarily him, sit next to him and watch what he does and then copy it. It's creating a neurological rut. And I do think that is the most natural way that we learn. And necessarily we shouldn't necessarily be looking to leave that so quickly, as much as to realize there's some limitation to that, and so to be aware of it and be flexible enough to create new neurological ruts.
Yeah. You talked about leadership as well, and that's a big
Mm-hmm.
passion of yours in so many different facets, but that's one of mine as well. And
Mm-hmm.
as a new teacher, I'm starting to really dive into
Right.
creating educational opportunities for that specific skill set within my band and for my students. So many of my
Right.
students are really interested in that, but there's no guidance on how to how to do it, what's the proper way, and some
Right.
who knows, like some of these students' parents or families environments are not healthy,
That's right.
and so they don't have a good role model, and so you
Right.
have, as a band director, I mean, we can all relate as musicians that at least one of our band directors or music teachers was like a father figure or a mother figure
Mhm.
to us. And so as a teacher, I think you kind of have to take on that responsibility and provide as much value as possible for the
Right.
students. So with leadership, I'm actually running into a difficult situation, and this is kind of getting personal, but I feel that in teaching leadership or in teaching awareness of leadership skills and principles, to
Mm-hmm.
students, it's becoming more about me, and I'm trying to get rid of that flavor, especially when you're the one trying to influence that concept of leadership in your
Mm-hmm.
program and in culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can easily become about like me and what I can teach them, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to avoid that. And so this is more like therapy now for me.
Mm.
But do you have any insight or advice on
Well,
how I should approach the next couple of weeks or years?
I do think that there are some teachers, and I find this more in the choral world than I do the instrumental, but there does tend to be this sort of cult of personality that some teachers like to, and I don't even know if they realize they do it, but they sort of use that as the primary force in the room. And I think that actually stunts a student's growth. So I appreciate, Taylor, I'm not saying that to you, but I do think that's the sign of a good teacher is you're asking yourself, how am I getting in the way of learning? Whatever the learning is, leadership, quarter notes, whatever the case may be. So I think that's an important question, and to recognize that we can actually get in the way. And sometimes my personality is not actually the best way. So I appreciate that. Now, I don't know. There are much better people at teaching leadership than me. I've long had a passion. In fact, I'd love for you to come to your master's degree with me and make that your thesis topic. That would be that'd be
There it
really
is.
great. That's
There it
something
is.
I'm down. Let's do it.
I've wanted to do that for a while. So I appreciate, but also I don't want you to sell yourself short, Taylor, because these students don't know what honesty is from a book. They're learning from a book the word honesty, and they're applying that term to a phenomenon, but they actually see the phenomenon in Mr. Smith.
Exactly.
So don't sell yourself too short there. You have an important role to play. So that being said, I do think as teachers, we got to start with the end. What do we want them to be like? And then you work backwards. What are those character traits? And the state of California has character traits in its guidelines that it desires for schools to be working on. One of my thesis students just finished a project using that, developing a curriculum for her elementary school that incorporate those character traits into those musical experiences. So this is not a far off topic. This is not something that just those of us who are at religiously based institutions should deal with. This is part of the California state guidelines. So I think this is important to ask, and I think it's for the betterment of our society as well, obviously. So I'm probably getting the ball lost in the weeds here, Taylor, but
no, it's good.
I think that's important.
Really good, helpful feedback and just insight, because it is like it's one of those things where I guess you feel like you're doing the right thing, but then that's when you're blind, right? You feel like you're good, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, I know nothing. And so I don't know. It's that phenomenon of being too confident in something, and how that negatively affects your.
Possibly, but there's some people who act like they know, but they don't know. There are some people who actually do know and act like they know. And, you want a dentist like that. You want to go to a dentist who knows. And they know that they know. And not in some bad way, but as much as when I go in there with this problem, they go, here's the issue. Let me help you with it. Versus a dentist who goes, well, I think it's this issue, or I know it's this issue. I don't know how to help you. I guess that's better. But there is a way, and don't sell yourself too short there. So be careful.
And lastly, that's something that I wish I could have learned more of in college was some type of leadership within that world. So do you think, my last question, I guess, for this will be, where do you see the current education, especially in college and music education majors, going in the next 5 years? And then for a short question in the beginning, do you think leadership should be a part of that?
Yeah. That's a great question. I do think we have to kind of step back. What governs the classes that occur in a collegiate music degree? And if the university is part of the National Association of Schools of Music, NASM, which APU is, which I'm quite sure that Long Beach was, that there have very distinct parameters of what courses can be offered in order for you to call that a Bachelor of Music degree. So there's handcuffs that we have, which is why, like on our campus, our NAFME music education chapter, we try to use that with student leaders and use that environment to help develop a leadership. In fact, that's one of our core cornerstones of our NAFME group, is developing leadership, networking, and so forth. So, so should leadership be a part of it? Absolutely. Really, what we're talking about is personhood development. Now, should music education majors be the only ones with leadership? This is one of the things I try and push on and even when I do interviews for prospective students, I actually want to find out if they think of themselves as a leader. Because no matter what major they choose or what emphasis they choose, they're going to probably achieve more. They're going to persist longer because they're taking responsibility for themselves and for others to some extent. And so, we want leaders. So, is the collegiate music education curriculum going to accomplish that? I don't think you're going to get musical leadership 101. But I do think it's sort of weaved in there inherently. You might pick it up more from ensemble directors, but yeah, that's a good question. Like with my graduate conducting students and my grad music ed students, we actually have leadership books that we go through. And then we think about how do these leadership traits or how these leaders dealt with these situations, how does that affect, or how can we take those ideas and draw it into the music? So will it be incorporated? I'm not going to hold my breath. I do think the music education narrative, the talking points, is concerned with equity and the idea that more and more students are involved. And so there is a pull from band, orchestra, choir, because there's a perception that it's the fault of band. It's the medium of band is why only 10% of students are involved. So if we have other things, steel drums, ukulele, popular music, we call lots of things. There is a pull to say band, orchestra, choir is probably part of the problem. So if we have other things, more students will be involved. Right. And I think that comes from a good place, a desire to have more people.
Yeah, casting a wider net. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
so I think that
80%.
Yeah. I don't think it's true. I don't think, and I'm doing research on that right now.
I'm actually curious into knowing why you don't think that's true, and if you
I actually don't think kids. I think human beings are complex people, and so it's not necessarily G major triads. Kids are not in music because of G major triads. Kids are in music, I think, because of the socio-psychological desires and needs and wants that they have. And so they can get those from lots of different experiences. They can get that from ukulele. They can get that from, well, maybe not ukulele, but they can get that from lots of different arenas, right? While I'm bagging on ukulele, I just want everyone to know my ukulele is actually right here. Okay, so I love ukulele too. But anyway, I think kids like that socio-emotional collaboration that's going on. And I have a working theory that it's the connection with the music teacher of why they stick in it.
Agreed.
So when we look at Texas, and when the Texas bands have 300 or 400 kids in them, but they actually have 3 or 4 directors, it may actually be that those 3 or 4 directors are able to create more of that relationship. They have more bandwidth to accomplish that. Whereas when you have, that may be why in California we don't have a whole lot of 300 plus bands, because it's rare that someone has more than one band teacher, right? So that's sort of part of my working working knowledge.
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
love that,
working
and
from.
I feel like reaching the other 80% is definitely something that a lot of band directors have thought about but don't know how to
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
You know, and how to provide that. So they feel like they need to create new ensembles, a rock
Hmm.
band, a guitar program,
Hmm.
ukulele, wheel programs, whatever it is,
Hmm.
to be able to reach those students, which is fair. Which is, I mean,
Yeah.
you want to provide that experience to as many kids as possible.
Yep.
But again, it's about providing the experience.
Yeah.
What are you providing in that avenue?
Yeah. And I think certain populations, certain contexts, um, within certain contexts, certain mediums of, or certain avenues of music learning can take root, whereas others can't. In some communities, a marching band might be the best thing ever. In some communities, the popular music situation might be the best, um, and that's fine. That's great. That's great. So in that way, some people look at band as an avenue of music education. Some people come at band from an artistic medium, which is trying to catch up to the orchestra. Uh, I sort of see it as both.
All right, ready for closing questions, Eric?
Yeah. All right. So, what are you reading?
What am I reading? I'm reading a lot of blueprints right now.
Band director
Reading
blueprint.
hashtag.
The hashtag, yeah.
It's a great title, by the way, you guys.
That's
I
gonna be
really love it. What am I reading right now? I referenced The Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene Peterson, the great Presbyterian minister who functionally created a translation of the Bible called The Message in contemporary terms. I'm reading him. I'm a little embarrassed because I'm not reading a lot at the moment because of all the stuff I'm doing, but I'm about to take a sabbatical in the fall. So,
Oh, wait,
uh,
what?
and so I'm going to be doing a lot more reading there. And
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
very interested in the way that people see the world. Part of my sabbatical is on the effect of critical theory and conflict theory on music education narrative. So I'm sort of always living in sociology, and although I think part of my book is going to be making the case that it's no longer a theory; people are living by it. So it's a philosophy now. But then trying to listen more. I try in the summers. I try and listen. So I tend to pick a composer over the summer and soak in that composer because during the year I don't have as much time. And not even scores, although I will with scores. I'm more interested in just taking in and having, like sort of reference neurological ruts, having that composer create some neurological ruts. Um, so as a wind player, I haven't, especially as a saxophonist, most of the repertoire that I engaged with was like post 1900. So everyone kept talking about how great Beethoven was. I took classes and all that, but I never really got into Beethoven. And so, a couple summers ago, it was we're going to spend the summer on Beethoven and whatnot. So it's more listening. So who am I listening to this summer? John Corigliano, and then Debussy, and because I funny enough judge a lot of piano competitions, so I got to stay up on their repertoire and whatnot. So the Corigliano and Debussy this summer.
John, how do we find you?
Well, I'm here in Southern California. Want to stop by my house? We can have a drink and I'll grill for you if you want. Burdett at apu.edu is my email. I'm trying to do less and less social media, so you can find me on there. But I'd much rather you email me, and I'd rather call you and have a discussion. So you can find me that way. The AP website has me, Arcadia Symposium. And then you can find me at 901 East Alasta Avenue in Azusa most days.
That's right. Yeah,
Come by.
definitely. What is your favorite drink?
Are we talking adult drinks?
Yes,
Or are we talking?
yes.
Oh boy. Well,
this is like band director after hours. So
yeah.
That's right.
Well, I think my go-to is an old fashioned.
Yes.
So I would say that's my go-to. 1800 tequila. And then my brother has lived in the UK now for almost 15 years. So I've Scotch is something I've tried to get a hold on. So Oban I like, and I'm sure anything single that's over 30 years old, I'm probably going to be happy with. So
Definitely.
yeah. And then actually I love red wine too. So a big fruity cab from Napa or Paso, I'm very happy with. Although I don't really enjoy the French wines as much as I probably am guilted into thinking I should. But
well, we're in California. We appreciate the
true.
California wines better.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go, I just want to commend you for your time and your thought process on these answers. Gives a lot of insight, not only for me, but I'm sure for the audience. Just overall provides awareness for the environment of music education and our career paths. And I just am so grateful for your time, and look forward to having another session with you.
I'd love to.
Hopefully within the next year, so that we can
sounds
talk
great.
about your sabbatical and your experience with that. I would like to finally ask you, what is your blueprint for success?
There's a difference between experts and non-experts. So gain expertise. I think the second blueprint I would say is be aware of your will. Be aware of when you're willing for good things. Be aware of when you're willing for not good things. And be honest with those and take those into account and go about the change necessary to accomplish that. I think life is about making things beautiful. I think beauty is actually just love brought to tangible reality. And so I think make things beautiful. Make a house beautiful. Make a marriage beautiful. Make a band room beautiful. Make beautiful music. Create beauty. I think it's an important axiom.
It was nice talking to you, Dr. Burdett, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
See you soon.
You can find information on today's guest, show notes, book recommendations, and more at our website, banddirectorblueprint.com. If you're not part of our Facebook group yet, you should be. We are active every day, and we love engaging with you on Facebook and Instagram. We enjoy bringing you stories, insights, and especially practical concepts and ideas you can take and apply in your program or career today. So please join us and let us know who you are and who you would like to hear from next on the show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review to help us reach more people like you. And I leave you with one question. What is your blueprint to success? Take care, everyone.